Welcome everybody. Today is International Literacy Day, and we have Frieda Wishinsky here with us. Frieda's written over 70 books for children, including Unga Bunga, Your Mean Lily Jean, the Marilyn Bailey Picture Book Award winner, Please Louise, and the series Survival, and nonfiction books, Explorers Who Made It or Died Trying. And she's here today. She's going to talk a little bit about different types of books that she's written, and she's going to tell us a few stories, and we're going to also talk about some writing ideas. And if you happen to have any questions for her, you can send them maybe to me, and I can pass them on to her at a later date, and I can get back to you with her answers.
That sounds like a great idea. I'm always happy to answer questions.
Good. All right, so welcome, Frieda.
Hi, and this is a strange world for all of us, but I'm glad to be here because I can see that we're all reading more books, because I've got a bunch of books on hold in the library, and I think there are a lot more books on hold than there used to be. So I think we're all being a little isolated, and we're learning to cope, and books help us cope. Books help us get through tough stuff. And also some of us are far away from other people. So we miss people, and books are kind of friends. So that's how I always think of a book is another friend I need when I need to learn how somebody else lives or how I feel, and does anybody else feel like that? One of the big questions people always ask me when I go to schools is, where do you get your ideas? And my feeling is ideas are everywhere. You just have to pay attention. Like when I speak to kids at schools, I say, well, you got up this morning. Some of you weren't great getting up. I have to admit, I have never been good at getting up. I mean, there are those people that jump out of bed. Good morning, world. I am not one of them. I take my time getting up, and I do the 5-minute more thing. Sometimes 5 becomes 10, becomes 15. And then when I have absolutely no choice, I get out of bed. Well, once I was asked to write a story for grade 4 Nelson, an educational company. And I sat there thinking, what could I write about? And I realized I have a story about getting up. But I didn't tell my story exactly. I changed it a bit, and I had a mean fairy godmother who kind of pushed this little girl to get up, and then started to boss her around too much and made her do all sorts of things. But the whole idea came from me not being great to get up. So the story that everybody has, everybody gets up. So there's a story there. Then there's breakfast. There's lots of stories about food, how you like food, what you like, what you don't. I have a grown-up son who I joked lived on cereal and milk. And if you put a needle in his right hand, you would probably get milk coming out instead of blood. And a needle in his left hand, you might get cereal coming out. And he still eats, when in doubt, eats cereal. And I think you could come up with a funny story about food and how we all have our food things. You know, people who don't eat crusts and just eat the middle of the bread, or maybe people who eat the crusts and don't eat the middle of the bread. So there's stories there. There's stories about getting dressed. Now, all of us are living in a very unusual dress world. I do not stay in my pajamas. I know people who think that's the best thing in the world, is now that you're at home, going to school from home, going to work from home, doing whatever, you can stay in your pajamas. To me, that's like I'm still in bed. I need to get up and pretty quickly get dressed. Otherwise, I feel like daytime and nighttime are all mixed up together. There could be all sorts of stories, even though you're not at school, about what are you wearing? Now, let's say you have your very favorite blue shirt. If because you're home, you get to wear the blue shirt. And your mother or father says, you cannot wear that blue shirt anymore. That blue shirt is dirty. That blue shirt is stinky. Blue shirt needs to go. And you are so in love with the blue shirt. It is comforting. It's like a blanket. There's the story. You know, how we're dressing is funny. I'm wearing a decent top, but no, my jeans aren't bad today. But sometimes I wear old jeans with huge holes, which I know is very fashionable, but I'm not sure I'd wear out. So there's lots of stories about how we're living right now. Their clothes are different. So let me share with you my very first book, because that book is both my first book and also a pretty new book. And it's a book that's had different pictures. And the idea came from when my daughter, who's younger than my son, like a lot of babies, cried and cried and cried. And babies don't really talk, right? So you don't always know how to make them stop crying. And one day, her brother, who's 5 years older, went over to her and spoke a whole load of nonsense, like ooey gooey fooey, ya ya na na hoo hoo, blah blah, whatever. And she looked at him as if he was saying something really intelligent, and she stopped crying. And I thought this was a really good idea for a story. So this is what I wrote. Can you see it?
Yep.
It's called Unga Bunga, and this came out ages ago in 1990, I think. And it came out in the United States. Let me see what year. Here's where you can tell the year. For those who don't know, look inside your book with all these numbers and stuff, and that tells you the year the book's published. And the book did fine for a bunch of years, and the company, Little Brown, ran into some problems with their own money stuff. Anyway, they put it out of print, which means it's not being printed anymore. But I was lucky because I think it's a good story. So I sold it twice with different pictures. This is Unga Bunga from the US. Actually, the illustrator is in England, in the UK. I've never met this illustrator, and I've never met the other illustrator for the first version. Oops. Really different ways of seeing the main character. And there are a couple words changed at the back of this because of even though we all speak English, we sometimes use different words. So I had to change a couple words for the English audience. This is the version that got sold to the US, but it sold to Scholastic Canada, and they asked Michael Marchenko, who you all know from Robert Munch. Everyone thinks this is a Robert Munch book, and it's not, obviously.
Must be good for you.
Yeah, I'm fine
They
with
see
it.
that and they think, wow.
Yeah, I'm good with it. Yeah, you know, I think it's better than Robert Munch book. But Michael Marchenko did it. The funny thing is, the Americans, Michael Marchenko was not their style. Like, they did not love the art style. So they went with the English style. So I have literally 4 different kinds of countries. 2 in these, well, this is also in Europe. When it got sold in Europe, this is the one that stayed. And this is in Canada. But luckily, I kept saying to Scholastic, who published the Michael Marchenko one, I kept saying, wouldn't this make a good board book? Because board books are really in style now, because there are a lot of, there are quite a few people having babies these days. And finally, they did a board book many years after the first book came out. So the board book's about 2 years old. I'm looking in the back, which tells me the age, 2017, back here tells me. So the same book has all these different lives. And here's the little chunky board book, which is probably in your library and hopefully doesn't get eaten too much. I have a granddaughter now who's still reading board books. I mean, not reading herself, but she looks at board books, and it's good because, you know, little kids like to eat books. So board books are a little harder to eat. So that was my first book, and it came from something that happens in my life. Well, then I went on and wrote a bunch of other books. And one of my early books is called Jennifer Jones Won't Leave Me Alone. And this really cute little red book was done in what year? See, I forget what year, 1995. That's a long time ago too. And it was done by a company called HarperCollins. And I really love the illustrations here. Linda Hendry, who I know, who lives in Ontario, kind of in the country, did the illustrations. Now, that doesn't mean I had anything to do with the illustrations. People think that you call up, if you write a story, you call up the illustrator and say, oh, could you make his hair look like this? You don't talk to the illustrator. You just get to see what it looks like at the end. But I do love the hair. I don't know if you can see his hair. He's got like, I call it talking hair, because when he's happy, his hair looks one way. And when he's in shock, his hair goes like, in shock. Oh my God. But anyway, the HarperCollins kind of stopped doing this kind of book, picture books. So we sold it. I had an agent then. We sold it to England. I've never met this guy, but I've been in touch with him. So look how different it looks. What a different. Same words, different look.
I like the British look.
You like the British look.
I
That's
do.
so interesting. My husband doesn't like this art, and I like both. What I like about this art is he leaves things out, and it's actually much more in style now, this kind of look.
Yes.
This was an older look. For instance, there's a page here where he has a bunch of kids, and some of them don't have arms or legs. They're where's that picture? I'm just looking. Yeah, they're outside, and some of them have part of it, like poor little kid doesn't have one of the arms. He just suggests things. And what I liked is he played around with the type. So sometimes he'll make a word bigger, gigantic, like when someone shouts, he makes it really big. So this story is about, it rhymes. I've written about 3 or 4 things in rhyme. So I don't know if that's called poetry or not, but rhyme is very hard to write well. Everyone thinks they can write rhyme. Try rhyming, it's hard. Yeah. But this one rhymes, and it's about a girl who annoys a boy a lot in class. And it was based on my son, who one day in grade 2 came home and said, this girl is bugging me, except I knew he liked it. So I'm going to read you Jennifer Jones, because it's one of my favorite books to read. It won't take long. And I don't know if you can see the pictures easily, but I will read with a lot of expression. Jennifer Jones won't leave me alone. She sits by my side. She shouts in my ear. She tells me she loves me. She calls me her dear. She writes me love poems full of words like adore. Then she sticks on red hearts she bought at the store. And my friends laugh and snicker. They point and they stare. They say, you two make such a cute little pair. Well, we don't. And I hate it. I've had quite enough. I wish that she'd move and take all her stuff. She could move to the jungle and live in a tree and talk to the monkeys instead of to me. But if she insists that she's not going there, she could head for the Arctic and bother a bear, or fly to the desert, or go to the moon. I really don't care, as long as it's soon. Hooray. Hallelujah. Guess what I just heard? Jennifer's moving. Her mom's been transferred. I'll miss you, she said, with a tear in her eye. Then she gave me a kiss and whispered, goodbye. And when the illustrator does the word goodbye, he does it really tiny because it's a whisper. Now our seat is all empty. There's nobody there. There's no one to kiss me. There's no one to care. So I write in my notebook, I add and subtract. I study my spelling, I learn a new fact, but it's boring, it's lonely. I miss her a lot. I wish she'd return to her usual spot. And to make matters worse, she's off in Europe. She writes, it's divine seeing Paris at night, sailing boats down the Rhine. Munching chocolates in Brussels, eating pizza in Rome, nibbling Viennese pastries you can't get at home. She's having such fun. I thought in despair, she'll never come home. She'll stay over there. But then I read on, I'll see you in June, and I yelled, whoop-dee-doo. She'll return very soon. As soon as I did, the kids asked me why. I was jumping and shouting, so I thought, should I lie? But I told them the truth as I opened the door, and I ran off to buy red hearts at the store. Together again. So this book won 3 kids awards in the UK, in England, and I got to go over there for one of them. And I had never met the illustrator, this guy, Neil. I had no idea what he looked like. And there was this big party, and it was really fun. They had all the kids come to this big banquet hall because the kids had picked their favorite books in different categories. So I'm in this room, and I'm looking around thinking, what does Neil look like? And I see this tall, skinny guy with goofy black and white shoes. I don't know why, but I knew. I walked over to him and I said, are you Neil? And he said, yes. How did you know? And I said, you look like your pictures. And he just did. He's very, very nice. So I did 2 books with him. I did another book with him called Nothing Scares Us. So that's very cool to have an illustrator that you sometimes know before, sometimes after, sometimes you never meet them at all.
So the award that you won from over in Britain, it almost sounded like there that it was sort of like a forest of reading.
Exactly, and it was for 3 places. Kids chose.
Yeah.
I won in Portsmouth, Sheffield, and where did I go? It was right outside of Manchester. Anyway, that was the one I went to. I got a grant to go over, and I spoke at some schools too, so I traveled around a little bit. It was really fun because I have a New York accent. And it's really interesting. I mean, we do speak the same language, and kids are kids and they get it. The kids wrote their comments about, and the boys wrote, I like the story, but too much kissing. So it was very typical. Lots of fun to have a book in another country, and especially if you get to visit. And I've had a few books in England, 3 or 4, so Unga Bunga was in England. I've never met the illustrator for Unga Bunga. I met Neil now. And what else was in England? Yeah, Jennifer Jones and Nothing Scares Us. Yeah, so it is fun to have a book have one book in Germany, Please Louise. And it was so amazing because I was in Germany, in Bavaria, up in this little mountain town. It's the only book I've translated into German. And I pass a library window, and there's my book. It's called Bitte Louise. And I was so excited because they obviously didn't know I was there.
Did you go in?
Sorry?
Did you go in?
Yes, of course. Yeah. I went in and I said, the librarian was very, very sweet. And then I was on the way to a bakery, and I told everybody in the bakery. And when I came back, the book was not in the window anymore because I think somebody had taken it out. So there was something about advertising. Because it's very exciting to see. I have books in Poland. I was in Poland recently. I have books in Hungarian, in Russian, which is very interesting having a book in Russian because I did a book called A History of Just About Everything, which covers just about everything historical. And I split the book with my writing partner. Sometimes I write with this woman, Elizabeth MacLeod, nonfiction. I wrote about the Russian Revolution. And I thought they would want to change things because
Yeah.
no, the Hungarians for this book really wanted two of the Hungarian guys in there. So they asked to make changes. Some Hungarian guy whose name I don't recall because they wrote it, invented the fountain pen. Fine, good with me. But it's really, I have books in Chinese, and in Korean. So obviously I have no clue sometimes how they translate it. And people say, don't write in rhyme because they'll never buy it because it's hard to translate rhyme. Jennifer Jones is in a bunch of places. I don't know. I guess some people can do it. I mean, I just think it's very interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share my newest picture book, which is called Alfie No. I met the illustrator, Emma, who's in the back. She showed me how to use Instagram, actually. She's young, she was here one day. And this book came out last year. It's right before COVID. It's about a little boy who gets into mischief, not because he wants to be bad, but because he's just curious, which is so much like my son and so much like my granddaughter. This could have been written about her. So I'll just read you the first page so you get a sense. And you don't know, there's a dog in the story. You don't know who's talking. It's either the dog or the kids, because at the end you find out. So it says, my friend Alfie always gets dirty. He jumps in puddles. He dives in leaves. He rolls in sand. What do you think his parents going to say to him when he gets all mucky? I heard my son say this 10 times yesterday on Facebook, a FaceTime with my granddaughter. He went, Gracie, no. Alfie, no. I don't know what she was doing, but he said, Gracie, no. Alfie tries to stay clean. He didn't mean to knock over the oatmeal this morning. He didn't mean to knock over the milk. He didn't mean to get blueberry jam all over his face. And probably this good book could have been written about any 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old who just is curious and wants to check things out. And sometimes you get into trouble. And then when they get all mucky, mom and dad want them to take a bath and they don't want to take a bath, but then they're forced to take a bath. And because it turns out to be fun, they splash mom and dad because that's fun too. So that was a fun book to write. So that's something about my picture books. And do you have any questions, Miss Uhl? Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Now, you started out as a teacher, correct?
Right.
What really made you take the shift to writing?
I'm not even sure it was a shift. I was one of those people who always wrote, no matter, when I was in school, and I always liked writing. I enjoyed writing more than I enjoyed taking an exam. Give me a paper to do, I'll do that faster than an exam. When I was teaching, I taught special ed. So I taught every grade. I went literally from kindergarten, and then I taught people in training to be teachers. So I taught through university and teenagers, every grade. And when I was teaching learning disabled teenagers in London, Ontario, they had these really boring, easy to read novels in those days. That goes back So I didn't know what to do, and I kind of got adopted by the head of the library services because I said, I'd like to use picture books. Let me try because I love picture books. And if they're good, I think they're universal. It doesn't matter how old you are.
Mhm.
So there was some money at the school, and I went and bought a whole bunch of picture books, and the kids loved them because they were easier to read, but they weren't baby books. They were funny. I mean, a really good picture book is for anybody. I still laugh at my favorite picture books. Um, the other day, my granddaughter's cat, well, no, first they had a big box they got from something, and my granddaughter climbed into the box. And of course, their cat goes, because cats love boxes. So I remembered a book called My Cat Likes Boxes. I had it years ago, and I went and I ordered it for her. And I think it's funny still. It's got repetition, but it's true. So a lot of these books are very true. I mean, Goodnight Moon is still a great, I still like listening to it. Where the Wild Things Are is one of the most brilliant books. So, anyway, so while these kids wrote, I said, okay, I'm going to write. And when I had a little time off for 2 months, my husband was in medical school. He went to Oregon. I sat in the library and I wrote 2 pages, didn't realize it really wasn't a whole story, sent it off and got a nice comment from a woman who's a big shot now in publishing who said, this is very funny as far as it goes. And I realized I hadn't written the whole story. So I got hooked. And then I was teaching when my first book came out, but then I eventually just started to write full time. And what I love about visiting schools or speaking to people is I feel like part of me is still in the classroom.
Yes.
The fun part. I don't have to do yard duty. I hated yard duty, especially on cold, icy days. Hated standing there. So there's that.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people have quirks when they write. Do you have any quirks?
What do you mean by what do you mean by quirks?
Something that you do that you may think that makes your writing better, like, I don't know, walking backwards into a room or, whatever, just something that
Oh,
you sort of is a little bit a part of you.
oh, that's interesting. I don't know if it's quirks, but I think there are different ways different people work about anything. I tend not to be sit in the seat for 4 hours kind of person.
Okay.
And even with COVID, because we have 3 levels here, I'm on the top level right now, which is second level, and there's a window. Um, and I will write for a while, and then if I can't think, I will go downstairs. So I kind of am going somewhere, and I'll check the news, or I'll get something to eat, or whatever, or I'll wash the floor. I mean, I'll do something, and then I'll come back. And I find that makes my writing better rather than actually just sitting for a long time.
Mhm.
So I don't know if it's a quirk, but I'm an up and down writer. Um, I will think about something and then I'll leave it. And I really believe when people get stuck, they should leave it and then come back to it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's a quirk, but it seems to work for me.
Yeah. Same thing. I can't remember who it was years ago. I spoke to an author and she had absolutely no food in the house when she was
Oh,
writing because she would just go and eat instead of write. So
oh, I don't
she would
have that.
have no, that was kind of a quirk for her.
Okay, that's interesting. No, I do go down and nibble something, but um, not I think it's more to just go somewhere different. You know how they say if you can't think or you're upset, go take a walk. Right
Yes.
now, walking isn't the easiest activity. If my garden, comes back in the spring, I might go work in the garden for a little bit and come back in. So I think it's important to change your location, and we're so much more stuck now in locations. I'm very grateful to my stairs because my stairs take me down somewhere else. So
And in this time when we really can't get out too much, stairs are good exercise.
they really are. And I really like that, I'm in a different space. I'm doing something different. And I really do think if you're stuck, don't just sit in your seat. first of all, it's not great for your back. Get up, do something else and come back, because 100% convinced that your brain is figuring out the problem you had without you thinking about it actively. I
Mhm.
think we forget that we actually are working through problems while not actively thinking about it.
Yes. Yeah.
So, so I thought I'd share a little bit of older kids' books,
Okay.
um, and then talk a little bit about a project I'm working on right now. So I've done a number of series, quite a few actually, about 3 or 4 series. One that's still quite popular and has not now just gotten sold to Nelson Canada, which is an educational publisher.
Mhm.
And they put it in a box of 16 books. I did 17. I don't know if it's because the box only held 16, but they only bought 16. And it's called The Canadian Flyer Adventures.
Oh, yes.
And they seem to be, I'm sending some, I keep getting emails from teachers or parents saying, do you have this one? I can't get it, because it's very hard right now in the transition to find them. So I have some, so I've been mailing some to people. This one's on the Titanic, SOS Titanic. But I've written about the Titanic in another way. I wrote a scholastic, one of those easy to reads, what's it
Yeah.
called? Levels, called Remembering the Titanic.
Did that come out around the 100th anniversary?
I think this one did. I'd have to look what year. Okay, so Titanic was 1912. So this came out 2012.
There you go.
That's probably why that was commissioned. And this came out before, I think. Yeah, they put ISBN pages in different places. Sometimes I don't. Well, here it is. This came out in 2010. So, so it was interesting because I knew a lot about the Titanic already because I had done research, and this is time travel, but I have real facts in the back and kind of fun facts about the Titanic. And I wrote about pirates, I wrote about the gold rush, I wrote about all sorts of things. And I learned a lot. And I find, because I write a fair bit, I sometimes use information from one book that I picked up in another form, in another book. So certainly by the time I did this, it didn't take that long because I knew, and it wasn't very long. So I've got the guy, here's the captain of the Titanic, Smith. There's Captain Smith. Also, the movie helped. And here's the first one in the series was Beware Pirates. And it's so cute because it's a teacher got in touch with me about doing Indigenous books. And there are a couple of my books have Indigenous characters that connect to real history. And this is about a real pirate who went to the Arctic. And there were Indigenous people there. And then there's one about British Columbia and Captain Cook. So I've got two. I've got one on the on pioneers, which fits into a lot of things. And then there's Hurry Freedom that has to do with the Civil War and slavery. So it's really cool because some books fit in nicely to the curriculum. And then just a few years ago, I was asked by Scholastic to write about survival. And the first book I did was Avalanche, which actually avalanches don't occur as much as people think they occur, but they're dramatic.
That's why we hear about them.
Yeah, that's why we hear about them. And if you've ever seen pictures of it, it's pretty, I bet it would be like beyond terrifying to suddenly see this wall of snow come at you. And it's quite dramatic. I did one on hurricane. I've never been in a hurricane, but I did one on ice storm, and I remembered the ice storm here. And then I did a shipwreck. But because at this point, I've written about at least three shipwrecks. So I was quite an expert on shipwrecks. And this was a Canadian boat, a ship that had lost as many people as the Titanic. So it's interesting how one book kind of, you learn one thing and then you use it in another book.
Yes.
So I wrote with my co-author Elizabeth McLeod, How to Become an Accidental Genius, came out in 2019. It's in its second printing, which is very nice, means people are buying it. And in April, please buy this book. This is my early copy called How to Become an Accidental Activist. Tell me that is not important right now. Speaking up. But it's more than speaking up. What sometimes is really cool is to take a bit of yourself and put it in a book. So I love gardens and trees and all that stuff. And I stumbled in a visit to New York, I'm from New York originally, on this little city garden, those like pocket gardens in abandoned lots.
Mhm.
And it was the first one. And there was a plaque that said Liz Christie Memorial Garden. And I couldn't get into the garden, it was locked. It was at the end there was a very tall building here and it was a very long garden and looked beautiful, but it had a fence around it. So I did eventually go in, and it was established because of this woman, Liz Christie, in 1973, the year I left New York, when New York was terrible. And one day she saw this kid playing in an empty lot and climbing into a refrigerator, which was dangerous. She went over and she kind of yanked him out. It was an abandoned refrigerator, took him over to his mother, and his mother said, look, nobody does anything. This neighborhood is a mess. Why don't you go do something? So she did. She was one of those people who want to do things. So she got her friends together and they cleaned up the lot. They got rid of all the junk, and they brought it over to a dumpster. She read about gardens. They brought in soil. They got horse manure from the local police. They have polices on horses, so they got manure from the police. And they turned it into the first city garden. And she started a movement of people starting gardens. Her name's Liz Christie. So I got to write about her because I just loved her story. And the garden's still there, 1973, and it's now a national monument, or I don't know, park or whatever. And one of my pictures, this one little one, you probably can't see it, which is exciting. It's the first time I've gotten one of my photographs is in the book of stepping stones in the park. Unfortunately, she died quite young. And she would be so happy to know how many gardens she inspired. When I've traveled, I see these little city parks, where people have gotten, either neighborhoods have gotten together. Sometimes people plant vegetables, sometimes just flowers, but it's a way of using a new space and in a city where you need green space. Plus, she was related to Frederick Law Olmsted, who designed Central Park, and I wrote a book called The Man Who Made Parks.
So there we go again.
Everything goes together. So I think this is a really nice book. I love it. And it'll be out. I don't know how COVID will be in April, but we'll see if it's a super COVID book or almost COVID over book. I don't know.
I'll have to get that one on the Forrester reading list.
I hope so. Because yeah, it's always nice to be. It's funny. The Genius book got on every single list except The Forest. It's Red Cedar, Hackmatack. It got best books in the States. Bank Street. I don't know how they make up these lists and stuff. But if it could go on the cover Forest, I would love it, because it just means I get to see more people. Mm-hmm. And so the book I'm working on now, I don't know if I have very much time. Do I have very much time?
About 11:15. You can stop whenever you'd like.
Okay, well, can I share this with you?
You may.
Yeah. So because I love trees, I have a skylight, and I have a gigantic maple tree outside, and it's like my pet. It changes all the time. I take pictures of it a lot. So I decided I'd like to write something about about trees. But most of the books out there about trees, there are two kinds of books. One is how a tree grows, kind of the biology of a tree. or like the giving tree, this tree and I, a relationship with a single tree. But what I thought was interesting is how many different trees there are in the world, and some of them are weird. So I started off thinking, okay, what could I call this? So decided to call this book, My Name is Sequoia, the sequoia tree,
Yes, yes,
because my granddaughter's middle name is Sequoia,
really.
which I thought was weird. And I said to my son, her first name's Grace, I said, why don't you just call it Grand Canyon? But he loves trees. And I have pictures of her with the sequoia. They're gigantic trees. They're beautiful. So that's the name of the book. My Name is Sequoia. It starts with a little girl who's named after a tree. And I went around the world with different trees. And they're like the monkey puzzle tree and all these different trees and where they're located. And I have a little kid talking about the tree that's in his or her neighborhood. And I'm going to end with my maple tree.
That sounds pretty cool. And I think the title itself, for all those kids that have different names,
Right.
would really be drawn to that.
Oh, that's a wonderful idea. I didn't even think about that because kids do have some unusual names. Sometimes just because they come from countries where the name isn't familiar to us,
Or
like
sometimes
Pamela,
because the parents are a little quirky themselves and
or the
like your
quirky.
son decide to give a different name.
Right. So I think that's cool. And also I have names of kids because I would Google,
Yeah.
like I have a tree in the Philippines. I really didn't know what the typical Philippine names might be. So I went and Googled a list and found a girl's name or a boy's name from the Philippines. So names I'm not getting into the names so much, but I'm just putting them out there. My name is whatever. And then talk about the different kinds of trees. Because, you're not going to see a banyan tree here. And I think that's so interesting to realize that it's not just that places are different. The fauna and the flora are very different, and people have relationships with those trees. What do you think?
I think that sounds really great.
And I'm almost finished. I have one tree left. I have to do 14 for a double spread. And I have one tree left. And I'm having so much fun doing this. I love it. Because again, see, I wrote about Central Park. I grew up in a city. I love parks. I love gardens. It just, you write what you love. And I absolutely love trees. I love birds, to tell you the truth. I have a bird story, but I haven't written it yet. I do love birds. I don't know if I want a bird in the house because of all the mess stuff.
Yes.
But I have bird like pictures and bird little figurines, and I love birds.
Yes, just outside though.
Outside birds. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that sounds really great. And thank you for taking some time with us today. And hopefully we'll be able to share this with everybody for a little bit of time. And if anybody does have questions for you, they can email me at anne.houle@wsplibrary.ca, and I can pass those on to you. All right.
That would be fun. I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, great. Well, thank you once again, and keep yourself safe and whatnot in this time of COVID, and we'll maybe get you back here again for a third visit.
Yeah, I'm happy to come. I would love it if we could all see each other again. Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.